The Habsburgs, their name echoes through history, a powerful dynasty whose reach stretched across Europe and beyond. They were emperors, kings, and queens, their decisions shaping the fates of millions, their palaces filled with unimaginable wealth and grandeur. But behind the shimmering gold and intricate tapestries, a hidden narrative unfolded. It was a story not of conquest or diplomacy, but of silent suffering, of bodies betraying their royal inhabitants, and of minds clouded by unseen torment. These were not the wounds of battle or the poison of rivals, but baffling, mysterious illnesses that left the most skilled physicians bewildered and left their powerful rulers wrestling with their own failing health. For centuries, a shadow of sickness followed the Habsburg line, a perplexing legacy of afflictions that defied explanation and whispered dark secrets about the very nature of power. Number 9. Charles II of Spain. The year was 1661, and in the grand palace of the Alcazar in Madrid, a new heir was born to the Spanish throne, Charles II. He was meant to secure the future of the vast Spanish Empire, a realm that still encompassed lands across Europe, the Americas, and even parts of Asia. But from his very first breath, it was clear Charles was different. His childhood was marked by a constant struggle. He was delayed in almost every aspect of his development. He did not walk until the age of 4. A full year after most children his age, and even then his steps were clumsy, uncertain. He did not speak clearly until he was much older. His words often slurred, difficult to understand. His physical appearance, too, was a subject of hushed whispers among the court. The legendary Habsburg jaw, a prominent, elongated lower jaw that jutted forward, was tragically exaggerated in Charles. It was so pronounced that his teeth did not meet, making it incredibly difficult for him to chew food. Contemporary accounts describe him as having a long, pale face, a large, misshapen tongue that hung out of his mouth, and a head that seemed too large for his frail body. He was often described as being unusually small and sickly for his age, with a constitution that seemed to crumble under the slightest strain. As he grew, his health only seemed to worsen. He suffered from frequent illnesses, fevers that burned through his small frame, convulsions that shook him violently, and painful bouts of various infections. His body, already weak, seemed to reject any attempt at improvement. His mind, too, seemed to falter. While he was not entirely without intelligence, his comprehension was limited, his attention easily lost. He struggled with learning, and his tutors found it a monumental task to impart even basic knowledge. He was prone to fits of melancholy, periods of deep sadness and withdrawal, where he would sit silently staring into space. By his teenage years, the signs of his lifelong suffering were etched deeply upon him. He remained physically frail with a stooped posture and a slow, shuffling gait. His speech was still indistinct, and his ability to govern a vast empire was severely compromised. He was often guided, sometimes manipulated, by his regents, his ministers, and his 2 successive wives. His first marriage to Marie-Louise of Orleans was fraught with difficulty. The union remained childless, a devastating blow to a dynasty desperate for an heir. The lack of a successor was not for want of trying, but Charles was reported to be impotent, unable to consummate the marriage. This inability led to further speculation and anxiety within the court. Marie-Louise, deeply unhappy and increasingly desperate, confided in her ladies-in-waiting about her husband's physical incapacities. She would pray endlessly for a miracle, but none came. Her own death after a decade of marriage left Charles heartbroken but still heirless. His second marriage to Maria Anna of Neuburg was equally barren. The pressure on Charles to produce an heir was immense, a heavy burden placed upon a man already struggling just to exist. As he entered his late 30s, Charles's condition deteriorated alarmingly. He suffered from severe headaches, periodic swellings in his legs and abdomen that physicians called dropsy, and increasingly frequent bouts of illness that left him bedridden for weeks. His body, by this point, was a catalogue of ailments. He suffered from chronic diarrhea, vomiting, and a constant debilitating pain. His teeth Those that had managed to grow despite his jaw deformity were rotting and falling out. His hair began to fall out, and his skin was covered in sores. The court, desperate for an explanation, turned to the supernatural. Many believed Charles was bewitched, his ailments the result of black magic and demonic possession. Exorcists were called to the palace, performing elaborate rituals to expel the evil spirits believed to be tormenting the king. Holy relics were brought to his bedside, prayers were recited ceaselessly, and even an attempt was made to exhume the body of his revered ancestor, Saint Ferdinand III, in the hope that his holy presence might offer a cure. Nothing worked. The king continued to fade. On November 1st, 1700, at the age of 38, Charles II, the last Habsburg king of Spain, died. His autopsy, performed by court physicians, revealed a body ravaged by disease. Accounts from the time speak of a corpse that was without a single drop of blood, with a heart described as the size of a peppercorn, and lungs corroded and putrid. His intestines were described as enlarged, and his brain filled with water. His death plunged Europe into the War of the Spanish Succession, a brutal conflict fought over the vast empire that Charles had left without a direct heir. His life, marked by profound suffering and mysterious afflictions, remains one of history's most striking examples of a powerful dynasty's tragic physical decline. Number 8. Joanna of Castile. Her story is one shrouded in the mists of history, where grief, power, and perception became inextricably intertwined. Born in 1479, Joanna was the third child of the formidable Catholic monarchs, Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, whose union had forged the foundations of modern Spain. From a young age, Joanna was intelligent and well-educated, proficient in several languages and interested in the arts and sciences. She was not initially destined for the throne, as her older siblings stood ahead in the line of succession. Her life took a dramatic turn when she was married in 1496 to Philip the Handsome, Archduke of Austria, the son of Emperor Maximilian I. This marriage was a cornerstone of a grand dynastic alliance between the Spanish and Habsburg royal houses. Philip was renowned for his good looks and charm, and Joanna, though perhaps not conventionally beautiful, fell deeply in love with him. Their early years together in Flanders were marked by intense passion, but also by Philip's numerous infidelities and Joanna's fierce jealousy. She adored him with an almost obsessive devotion, her love consuming her. Tragedy began to strike Joanna's family one after another. Her elder brother John, heir to the thrones of Castile and Aragon, died in 1497. Then, in 1500, John's posthumous daughter died. Next, her elder sister, Isabella, Queen of Portugal, died in 1498, followed by her son, Miquel, the designated heir to Portugal, Castile and Aragon, in 1500. Suddenly, unexpectedly, Joanna became the heiress to the most powerful kingdoms in the Iberian Peninsula. With the death of her mother, Queen Isabella I, in 1504, Joanna became Queen of Castile. Her husband, Philip, immediately asserted his claim to power alongside her. Their relationship, already strained by his infidelities, worsened under the weight of political ambition. Philip openly sought to marginalize Joanna, often claiming she was mentally unstable and unfit to rule. He spread rumors about her erratic behavior, her outbursts of jealousy, and her deep melancholia. Then came the devastating blow that would forever define her narrative. In 1506, while in Burgos, Philip the Handsome died suddenly, likely from typhoid fever. Joanna was utterly heartbroken, her grief overwhelming. She refused to leave his side, clinging to his coffin, insisting it be opened so she could gaze upon his face. One last time, her profound sorrow manifested in deeply unsettling ways. She traveled extensively across Castile with Philip's embalmed body, refusing to allow it to be buried for years. She would have the coffin opened periodically to kiss her husband's feet and gaze upon him. This macabre procession, stopping in various monasteries, sometimes in isolated, desolate places, fascinated and horrified her subjects and the European courts. Her father, Ferdinand II, who had stepped in as regent of Castile along with her son Charles V, who would later become Holy Roman Emperor, began to openly use Joanna's grief and behavior as justification, or incapacitation. In 1509, Ferdinand had Joanna confined to the royal convent of Santa Clara in Tordesillas. She was kept isolated, allowed very few visitors, and her children were gradually removed from her care. For the next 46 years, Joanna lived in confinement. Her life became a series of reported episodes, long periods of silence and withdrawal, refusal to change her clothes, rejection of food, and sometimes violent outbursts when attempts were made to force her cooperation. She lived in dim rooms, often refusing light, sometimes sitting in the dark for hours. Reports from those who saw her described her as disheveled, her hair unkempt, her clothes dirty. Yet there were also conflicting accounts. Some visitors noted her continued intelligence, her sharp remarks, and her occasional lucidity. Some suggested that her madness was exaggerated, a convenient political tool used by her father and son to secure their own power. She had brief periods of escape from her reclusion, most notably during the Comuneros Revolt in 1520 to 1521, when rebels seeking to restore her rightful rule briefly freed her. However, she ultimately refused to join their cause, perhaps due to fear, a sense of resignation, or perhaps a lingering loyalty to her son. After the revolt was crushed, Charles V tightened her confinement, appointing new stricter guardians. Joanna the Mad, as she became known, remained a prisoner in Tordesillas until her death. In 1555, at the age of 75, her life was a tragic enigma. Was she truly mad, suffering from a severe mental illness exacerbated by trauma and grief? Or was she a victim of political manipulation, a powerful woman whose emotional responses to loss were weaponized against her by ambitious men eager to seize her throne? The full truth of Joanna's mysterious mental state remains a subject of debate, a haunting question mark in the annals of Habsburg history. Number 7. Rudolph II, Holy Roman Emperor. Born in 1552, Rudolph was the eldest son of Emperor Maximilian II. He was raised at the austere Spanish court of his uncle King Philip II, an environment that instilled in him a deep sense of Catholic piety, but also a profound melancholy. When he returned to Vienna, and later, when he became Holy Roman Emperor in 1576, Rudolph displayed an increasingly complex and troubled personality. From the outset of his reign, Rudolph showed little interest in the day-to-day affairs of state. He delegated much of the governing to his ministers, preferring instead to immerse himself in his vast intellectual and artistic pursuits. He was a passionate collector of art, a patron of science, and an enthusiastic seeker of knowledge, particularly in the more esoteric fields of alchemy, astrology, and the occult. His court in Prague, where he moved his residence, became a haven for astronomers like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler, alchemists, mystics, and artists from across Europe. However, beneath this veneer of enlightened patronage, a deep-seated inner turmoil simmered. Rudolph became increasingly reclusive, shunning public appearances and withdrawing from society. He rarely left the confines of Prague Castle, preferring the solitude of his private chambers, laboratories, and galleries. Access to him became incredibly difficult, even for his closest advisors. His appointments were erratic, his decisions delayed, and his temper unpredictable. He suffered from bouts of profound depression, which contemporaries referred to as melancholy. These periods would leave him unresponsive, unable to concentrate, and filled with a sense of despair. During these times he would refuse to meet with anyone, neglecting his imperial duties entirely. The affairs of the Holy Roman Empire, already a complex mosaic of diverse states and religions, began to suffer under his detached and inconsistent rule. The reports of his behavior grew increasingly alarming. He developed intense paranoia, fearing conspiracies against him even from his own family members. He trusted almost no one, He became obsessed with security, frequently changing his locks and employing private guards. He was plagued by insomnia and restless nights, often pacing his rooms until dawn. His physical health also began to decline, though the precise nature of his ailments remained unclear. He suffered from general weakness, loss of appetite, and various nervous complaints. His family, particularly his younger brother Matthias, grew increasingly frustrated with his inability to govern. The religious tensions of the era were escalating, threatening to plunge Europe into devastating conflict. Rudolf's inaction and strange behavior were seen as a grave danger to the stability of the empire and the Habsburg dynasty. In 1608, a coalition of Habsburg archdukes, led by Matthias, formally declared Rudolf unfit to rule. They forced him to cede control over Hungary, Austria, and Moravia to Matthias. Rudolf was essentially stripped of his effective power, though he retained the title of emperor. This humiliation further deepened his depression and paranoia. He clung desperately to the crown of Bohemia, but even that was eventually seized by Matthias in 1611. In his final years, Rudolf's condition worsened dramatically. He became even more withdrawn, his physical appearance neglected, and his mind seemingly consumed by his private obsessions. He was plagued by delusions, often speaking of strange visions and believing himself to be under the influence of dark forces. He rarely ate, and his body grew thin and frail. On January 20th, 1612, Rudolf II died at Prague Castle at the age of 59. The exact cause of his death was attributed to a general weakening of his body, exacerbated by the mental anguish and profound melancholy that had plagued him for decades. His reign, marked by unparalleled artistic patronage and scientific inquiry, was equally defined by the enigmatic and debilitating illness that left him isolated, paranoid, and ultimately unable to command the vast empire he inherited. The mystery of his inner torment continues to puzzle historians, leaving unanswered questions about the true nature of the illness that gripped the mind of the Holy Roman Emperor. Number 6. Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. He was arguably the most powerful man of his era, ruling an empire on which the sun never set. Born in Ghent in 1500, Charles inherited a staggering collection of territories: Spain, its vast American colonies, the Netherlands, Austria, Naples, Sicily, and the Holy Roman Empire. He was a driven, ambitious ruler, constantly on the move, leading armies, negotiating treaties, and striving to maintain unity in a continent fractured by religious upheaval and political rivalries. But behind the grandeur of his imperial ambition lay a private battle with a relentless and debilitating illness. From a relatively young age, Charles began to suffer from gout, a painful inflammatory condition that typically affects the joints. For Charles, this was no minor discomfort. It was a chronic, agonizing affliction that would plague him for decades, progressively worsening with age. Contemporaries frequently remarked on his hobbling gait, the swelling and redness of his joints, and his constant need for assistance in walking, or even moving from one place to another. The court chroniclers and his personal physicians meticulously documented his suffering. Bouts of gout would leave him bedridden for weeks, sometimes months, unable to attend to the pressing matters of state. The pain was often excruciating, described as a fire in his joints making every movement a torment. His hands and feet became deformed over time, misshapen by the deposits of uric acid crystals that characterized the condition. These visible deformities and his limping walk became hallmarks of his later years. Beyond gout, Charles was also afflicted by a series of other mysterious and recurring ailments. He suffered from frequent fevers, often accompanied by chills and sweats, which historians have speculated could have been bouts of malaria, a common disease in many parts of his empire, particularly in Italy and the Netherlands. These fevers would drain him of energy, leaving him weak and susceptible to other infections. He also suffered from chronic stomach problems. Descriptions from his personal physician, Dr. Matthias Cornelius, speak of severe indigestion, stomach pain, vomiting, and episodes of profuse bleeding. This suggested a possible peptic ulcer, or perhaps another form of gastrointestinal disease that caused him constant discomfort and interfered with his ability to eat and digest food properly. His diet, often rich in meat and wine, common at the time for nobility, may have exacerbated these issues. The accumulated burden of these physical illnesses began to take a heavy toll on Charles's mental state. He grew increasingly melancholic and introspective. His once robust health and tireless energy began to fail him. The endless travel, the constant warfare, the relentless pressure of governing such a vast and diverse empire, all weighed heavily on a body racked with pain, and a mind increasingly exhausted to all who saw him. He lost weight, his face grew gaunt, and his eyes, though still sharp, often reflected a deep weariness. By the 1550s, the once dynamic emperor was a shadow of his former self. He found it increasingly difficult to ride a horse, to attend lengthy council meetings, or to withstand the rigors of campaigning. In 1556, a decision that shocked Europe was announced. Charles V, the most powerful monarch of his age, chose to abdicate his numerous crowns. He formally transferred the Holy Roman Empire to his brother Ferdinand, and the Spanish Empire, including its overseas territories, to his son, Philip II. This was an unprecedented act for such a powerful ruler. Charles cited his advanced age and his debilitating health as the primary reasons for his decision, stating that he no longer had the strength to bear the burden of such immense responsibilities. After his abdication, Charles retired to the monastery of Yuste in western Spain, seeking a life of quiet contemplation. Even there, his ailments pursued him. His gout attacks continued with relentless intensity, sometimes confining him to his bed for months. His stomach issues persisted, and he continued to suffer from fevers. He reportedly developed a deep abscess on his face, which caused him great pain. On September 21st, 1558, Charles V died at Yuste at the age of 58. His death, after a long period of decline and chronic illness, marked the end of an era. The exact combination of factors that led to his death, beyond the chronic pain and systemic weakening, remained somewhat mysterious. His life serves as a powerful reminder that even the most powerful rulers were not immune to the mysterious and debilitating forces of illness, and that sometimes the greatest battles were fought, not on the battlefield, but within their own suffering bodies. Number 5. Philip II of Spain. He was known as the prudent king, a monarch who ruled a vast global empire from the quiet confines of his study in the Escorial Palace near Madrid. Born in 1527, Philip II inherited the Spanish Empire from his father. The formidable Charles V, unlike his peripatetic father, Philip preferred a settled existence, meticulous managing the affairs of his empire. Yet, despite his preference for sedentary work, Philip's life, particularly his later years, were marked by a long, agonizing, and mysterious struggle with chronic illness. Philip's health began to decline noticeably in his middle age. He suffered intensely from gout, a common affliction among the Habsburgs, but in Philip's case it seemed particularly severe and debilitating. His hands and feet were frequently swollen and painful, making writing a key part of his daily routine, a torment. He often had to dictate his vast correspondence because he was physically unable to hold a quill. The attacks of gout would leave him bedridden for extended periods, disrupting the careful rhythms of his administration. Beyond gout, Philip was plagued by a host of other ailments. He frequently suffered from what his physicians described as catarrhs, a term often used to describe severe colds, bronchitis, or other respiratory infections, accompanied by chronic phlegm and coughing. These respiratory issues would often lead to fevers that would sap his strength. He also experienced digestive problems, including severe stomach aches and bowel issues that often left him weak and nauseated. As he entered his late 60s, Philip's health took a dramatic turn for the worse. The year 1598 saw his final decline, a period of immense suffering that lasted for 53 days. His body became a landscape of suffering, a testament to the relentless nature of his mysterious afflictions. He developed large, painful abscesses and carbuncles all over his body, particularly on his chest and legs. These festering sores produced an unbearable stench that filled his rooms, making it difficult for anyone, even his devoted daughter, Isabella Clara, Eugenia, to remain at his bedside for long periods. His legs became grotesquely swollen, a condition known as dropsy or hydrops, indicating significant fluid retention. This made any movement almost impossible, and he was confined to his bed or a specially designed chair. The pain was constant and agonizing. Sleep offered little respite, as the pain would often awaken him. Physicians of the era tried various remedies, from applying poultices to the sores to bleeding and purging, but nothing seemed to alleviate his suffering. In fact, some of the treatments, like the constant draining of the sores, likely added to his discomfort. The smell emanating from his body became so intense that his attendants resorted to burning incense and aromatic herbs continuously in his chambers, a futile attempt to mask the pervasive odor of decaying flesh. It was a harrowing sight for those who remained near him. Even in his final moments, the prudent king maintained a degree of his characteristic stoicism, clinging to his deep religious faith. He kept a crucifix constantly near him and received the last rites multiple times. On September 13, 1598, after weeks of indescribable pain and physical deterioration, Philip II died in the Escorial Palace at the age of 71. The precise medical cause of his final prolonged agony remained somewhat mysterious. While gout and chronic infections were clearly present, the sheer scale of the abscesses, the dropsy, and the overall systemic collapse pointed to an underlying, deeply debilitating condition, perhaps a severe form of erysipelas, or a combination of many accumulative problems that finally overwhelmed his system. His final days, marked by a shocking physical decline and an unbearable stench, stand as a grim testament to the mysterious power of illness to humble even the most absolute of rulers. Number 4. Maximilian, the first Holy Roman Emperor. Born in 1459, Maximilian I was a dynamic and ambitious ruler, often called the Last Knight, for his deep love of chivalry and his active participation in tournaments and warfare. He was a man of immense physical energy, constantly on the move, leading his armies across Europe, securing dynastic marriages, and laying the groundwork for the vast Habsburg Empire that his grandson Charles V would inherit. Yet, despite his active and seemingly robust life, Maximilian was plagued by mysterious and persistent ailments that ultimately led to his sudden and painful end. From various accounts, Maximilian suffered from what seemed to be chronic pain and general ill health, often exacerbated by the rigors of his campaigns. He was frequently described as suffering from various fevers and inflammatory conditions that would confine him to his bed for days. His physicians would often note his complaints of stomach pain and digestive troubles, which sometimes became severe. Like many Habsburgs, he exhibited some of the characteristic facial features associated with the Habsburg jaw, though perhaps less pronounced than later generations. He was known for his strong physical constitution, capable of enduring the hardships of war, but these underlying health issues would surface repeatedly, interrupting his grand plans. In the final year of his life, in 1518, Maximilian embarked on one of his typical grueling journeys across his territories. He was returning from a meeting in Augsburg heading towards the Netherlands, enduring the harsh winter conditions. During this journey, his health, which had been fluctuating for years, deteriorated rapidly and dramatically. He began to suffer from an intense and debilitating illness, described by his companions and physicians as a severe flux of the bowels, accompanied by extreme pain and weakness. This flux would be recognized today as acute dysentery, or similar severe intestinal infection. The symptoms were relentless: profuse diarrhea, often bloody, severe abdominal cramps, nausea, and vomiting. The rapid loss of fluids left him severely dehydrated and weakened. The journey became a torturous ordeal. Maximilian was forced to stop, frequently his condition worsening with each passing day. He was unable to eat or keep down food, and his body rapidly wasted away. His once powerful physique was consumed by the mysterious illness. He suffered from fevers that alternated with chills, and his strength dwindled alarmingly. He was transported in a litter, barely able to move, his mind often clouded by fever and pain. His attendants, accustomed to his boundless energy, were alarmed by his rapid decline. Despite the best efforts of his physicians who tried various herbal remedies and purges common at the time, his condition spiraled. Maximilian, realizing his end was near, dictated his last will and testament, and made arrangements for his burial. He insisted on being buried under the altar in the chapel of St. George in Wiener Neustadt, in a simple grave, his body placed directly on the earth, covered only by a slab. This request was a powerful reflection of his humility in the face of death, a sharp contrast to the grand tomb he had planned in Innsbruck. On January 12, 1519, Maximilian I died in Wels, Austria, at the age of 59. The cause of his death was definitively attributed to the severe intestinal illness that had ravaged him for weeks. While the immediate cause was clear, the precise nature of the infection, whether it was bacterial dysentery, typhoid fever, or another virulent pathogen, remains a medical mystery, highlighting the vulnerability of even the most powerful rulers to the unseen forces of disease. His vibrant life, cut short by a sudden and agonizing illness, stands as a testament to the unpredictable nature of health in an era before modern medicine. Number 3. Philip IV of Spain. He inherited a vast but troubled empire in 1621 at the young age of 16. Philip IV, born in 1605, possessed the characteristic Habsburg jaw, though perhaps less exaggerated than his eventual grandson, Charles II. He was an intelligent and cultured monarch, a great patron of the arts, famously commissioning works from Velázquez. Yet his reign was marked by continuous warfare, declining imperial power, and a pervasive sense of melancholy, all perhaps exacerbated by a series of mysterious health problems that plagued him and his family. From a young age, Philip was described as being somewhat delicate in constitution. While he was an enthusiastic hunter and equestrian, there were reports of frequent fevers, bouts of indigestion, and general weakness. These were common complaints among the nobility. But in Philip's case, they seemed to be a recurring drain on his energy and vitality. The tragedies of his family life were numerous and devastating, and some historians speculate they might have been linked to the same underlying health issues that affected him. He outlived all but one of his numerous children, a cruel fate that deeply affected him. His first wife, Elizabeth of France, died young. His second wife, Maria Anna of Austria, was also a Habsburg, and their union produced a string of sickly children, many of whom died in infancy or early childhood. The constant losses of his heirs weighed heavily on him, deepening his already melancholic temperament. As Philip aged, his physical condition noticeably deteriorated. He suffered from chronic gout, which caused him significant pain and affected his ability to move freely. His limbs would swell, and he would experience the characteristic agonizing flare-ups that left him bedridden. This made his already long working hours meticulously poring over state papers even more arduous. He was also afflicted by recurring episodes of severe stomach pain, vomiting, and diarrhea. These digestive issues were debilitating, often causing him to miss important meetings and public appearances. The nature of these chronic gastrointestinal complaints remains somewhat mysterious, but they clearly contributed to his overall decline. By the 1660s, Philip IV was a weary, worn-out man. His once fine features had become gaunt, his face pale, and his expression often somber. He seemed to carry the weight of his failing empire and his personal tragedies on his shoulders. The Habsburg jaw was increasingly prominent, and his speech, according to some reports, became somewhat slurred or difficult to understand, perhaps due to the increasing size of his tongue. In the summer of 1665, Philip's health took a sharp downturn. He developed a high fever, which persisted for weeks. This fever was accompanied by severe chills, profuse sweating, and intense bodily pain. His doctors tried various remedies, including bloodletting, purges, and poultices, but nothing seemed to break the fever or alleviate his suffering. He also suffered from severe headaches and what appeared to be respiratory distress, with coughing and difficulty breathing. His legs swelled dramatically, a clear sign of dropsy, and his body became increasingly frail. He was unable to get out of bed, and his mind, once sharp, seemed to wander. The physicians were baffled by the relentless nature of his fever and the rapid deterioration of his other vital functions. The general belief was that his body was simply worn out by the burdens of state and his personal sorrows. On September 17, 1665, Philip IV died at the age of 60. The immediate cause was attributed to a prolonged fever and complications from dropsy, but the underlying reason Tolzuri von Fallmach. His reign, marked by significant artistic achievement and continuous political struggle, ended with a physical decline that mirrored the struggles of his vast, diminishing empire. A testament to the silent, mysterious suffering that often befell the Habsburg kings. Number 2, Ferdinand I, Holy Roman Emperor. Born in 1503, Ferdinand I was the younger brother of the mighty Emperor Charles V. While Charles reigned over Spain and its global empire, Ferdinand became the linchpin of the Habsburg fortunes in Central Europe, ultimately inheriting the Holy Roman Empire as well as the crowns of Bohemia and Hungary. He was a shrewd diplomat, a pragmatic ruler, and a tireless administrator, often serving as regent for his brother. Despite his formidable intellect and political skill, Ferdinand, like many in his lineage, battled a persistent and painful chronic illness that shaped his later years. Severe and debilitating gout. Ferdinand's struggle with gout began relatively early in his life and grew progressively worse with age. This was not merely a minor inconvenience, but a crippling condition that caused him immense suffering. Attacks would strike without warning, turning his joints, particularly in his feet and hands, into swollen, inflamed masses of agony. He would be confined to his bed for days, sometimes weeks, unable to walk or even perform simple tasks. The pain was so intense that it frequently prevented him from attending council meetings, diplomatic negotiations, or other crucial state functions. His personal physicians meticulously documented his flare-ups, noting the severity of the swelling, the redness of the skin over the affected joints, and his constant cries of discomfort. He would try various remedies at the time, from herbal poultices to dietary restrictions, but nothing provided lasting relief. Beyond the visible and agonizing effects of gout, Ferdinand also suffered from other mysterious ailments. He frequently complained of stomach issues, including indigestion and pain, which would sometimes cause him to vomit. He also had bouts of what appeared to be kidney stones, a condition known for causing excruciating pain and sometimes leading to complications. The presence of such stones would have been incredibly debilitating and could have led to recurrent infections. As he entered his 60s, the cumulative effect of these chronic conditions became starkly evident. His once active and robust frame became increasingly frail. He moved with difficulty, often supported by attendants, his gait a slow shuffling shuffle. His hands, once capable of wielding a pen with authority and signing countless decrees, became gnarled and deformed by the repeated attacks of gout, making writing a painful chore. Despite his physical suffering, Ferdinand remained dedicated to his duties. He continued to correspond voluminously, advise his sons, and attempt to navigate the complex political and religious landscape of the Holy Roman Empire. However, his physical limitations undeniably impacted his ability to travel and personally engage with his various territories and princely subjects, forcing him to rely more heavily on his advisors and messengers. In his final years, the attacks of gout became more frequent and severe, and his general health continued to decline. He suffered from general weakness and seemed to be constantly fighting off various minor illnesses that his weakened body struggled to resist. The pain became a constant companion, limiting his already restricted movements. On July 25, 1564, Ferdinand I died in Vienna at the age of 61. His death was attributed to the long-standing and debilitating effects of his chronic gout, combined with a general failure of his bodily function. While gout was a known ailment, the relentless severe nature of Ferdinand's experience, combined with his other internal discomforts, highlighted the enduring mystery of how certain conditions could so profoundly incapacitate in an age without advanced medical understanding. His life was a testament to the sheer will required to govern an empire while battling constant agonizing pain from a mysterious and unyielding foe within his own body. Number 1. Leopold I, Holy Roman Emperor. Born in 1640, Leopold I was the second son of Emperor Ferdinand III. He was not initially destined for the throne, having been educated for a career in the church. However, the unexpected death of his elder brother, Ferdinand IV, made him the heir. He became Holy Roman Emperor in 1658, and his long reign, spanning nearly 5 decades, was a period of intense conflict, particularly against the Ottoman Empire. Despite his immense power and strategic acumen, Leopold I was a man often described as physically frail, even delicate, plagued by various mysterious illnesses throughout his life. From his early years, Leopold's constitution was considered weak. He was slender, with a noticeable stoop, and often appeared less robust than his contemporaries. He exhibited the characteristic Habsburg jaw, which contributed to his somewhat elongated and serious facial expression. While he was an avid hunter and enjoyed outdoor activities, his physical appearance and frequent ailments suggested a fragile health. One of the most notable and devastating illnesses he contracted was smallpox, which swept through Europe with terrifying regularity. Leopold contracted the disease as a child, and while he survived, it left him with a pockmarked face, a common scar of the virulent illness. This early brush with a life-threatening disease perhaps underscored his inherent physical vulnerability. Throughout his adult life, Leopold suffered from a variety of chronic complaints that puzzled his court physicians. He was prone to fevers that would strike seemingly without cause, often leaving him weak and exhausted for days or weeks. He frequently suffered from severe headaches, which sometimes incapacitated him. He also experienced what were described as catarrhs, suggesting chronic respiratory issues, persistent coughing, and general discomfort. His personal habits were often described as ascetic. He ate sparingly and was known for his deep piety. However, his diet did not seem to alleviate his mysterious digestive issues, as he often complained of stomach pains, indigestion, and general abdominal discomfort. These internal ailments were not always visible, but they contributed to his often somber demeanor and his frequent need for rest. As he aged, his physical fragility became more pronounced. He would tire easily, and the long hours required of an emperor during a period of constant warfare undoubtedly took a heavy toll. He relied heavily on his counselors and ministers, though he remained alternately in control. His frame remained thin, almost gaunt, and he seemed to age quickly under the pressures of his office and his persistent ill health. One of the more enduring mysteries surrounding Leopold's health was the perception of his melancholic and somewhat withdrawn personality, which some historians have linked to his chronic physical discomfort. His piety was profound, bordering on the superstitious, and he often sought solace in religious devotion, perhaps a response to his own physical suffering and the numerous personal losses he experienced, including the deaths of several of his children. In his later years, Leopold's gait became increasingly unsteady, and he seemed to move with a profound weariness. His breath was often described as short, and his voice, though commanding when necessary, could be weak. He suffered from various inflammatory conditions that caused him pain similar to gout, though not always specifically identified as such in records. On May 5, 1705, after a long and eventful reign, Leopold I died in Vienna at the age of 64. His death was attributed to a general and progressive decline of his health, a systemic weakening of his organs, and an accumulation of chronic ailments. While no single dramatic sudden illness was identified as the direct cause, his life had been a continuous battle against a mysterious array of fevers, pains, and internal discomforts that had slowly but inexorably worn him down. Leopold's long struggle with an unseen enemy within his own body stands as a poignant reminder of the enduring mysteries of health, even for those who held the fate of empires in their hands.